Last time we spoke, I was talking about Windbreaker and how ultimately I couldn't recommend the series. Not because it was bad, but because the adaptation didn't seem like it was actually going to be able to wrap anything up in a satisfying way, and that just going and reading the manga would make a lot more sense. So you should do that. But during that, I did mention a lot of metrics that I used to see how popular that series was, and also how those metrics happened to show that a completely different series became even more popular and searched for online as the season progressed. Kaiju number 8. Which is funny because compared to Windbreaker in several ways, this series is kind of rough. Don't get me wrong, ultimately I will be singing this show's praises as well, but for completely different reasons. First though, let's briefly talk about what the show is and how it exists within a similar situation to what we talked about last week. The easiest way for me to describe Kaiju number 8 is to really say that it takes a lot of cues narratively from Attack on Titan, but it just puts them into a more modern and technological setting rather than some pseudo-Renaissance era where we need to just kind of turn our brains off and not try to figure out how the whole gas mobility gear works, because it makes sense the less you think about it. So it's better to just not. Like how we are also not thinking about how Spider-Man can go web-slinging around New York, and eventually, there are going to be people that are going to have to clean up the multiple pounds of web goo that he leaves behind everywhere. Oh yes, the comic nerds will say, Spider-Man uses a special formula of web fluid that dissolves after a short amount of time. Yeah, tell that to Tobey Maguire. Anyways, the mangaka himself will say that for Kaiju number 8, he was influenced by the likes of Godzilla, Ultraman, and even Pacific Rim. But since Eren Yeager looks good on a thumbnail, I went with the inspiration he didn't bring up. Because if you try to argue with me that there are no Titan inspirations here at all, you obviously haven't either watched this show or Titan. Even the vice captain of the good guys is basically just a stand-in for Levi. In Kaiju number 9, Japan is under constant threat by various sized monsters, sometimes massively enormous beings that are just indiscriminately destroying entire cities. But humanity has learned to fight them with their own specially developed fighting forces, the Japan Defense Force, or JDF. Our hero Kafka doesn't start as a member of the JDF. He's not like some kind of miracle fighter who gains respect from his peers and society due to his abilities or anything. Instead, he is essentially a garbage man. A man whose job it is to help clean up the web fluid from the streets of Manhattan. No, really, he's part of a team that deals with the cleanup of kaiju remains after the JDF has already rode off into the sunset like big goddamn heroes. But Kafka wants to be part of the JDF. He wants to be a hero like that. He's dreamed of it since he was a child, even making a promise to a childhood friend that they together will save humanity from the kaiju. Said childhood friend is now a captain within the JDF, and poor Kafka is still here cleaning up kaiju shit. As a side note, I feel like I also now need to add Space Brothers onto the list of possible inspirations for this show. Might not be accurate, but if you know, you know. Thing is, Kafka is getting older now. He's not in his prime physically, and while he's not completely out of the running to be accepted into any kaiju fighting division, it's becoming exceedingly more likely with every passing year. Fortunately for him, however, after saving his Kohai from a kaiju, he gets attacked by a bug-type kaiju in the hospital that dives into his mouse facehugger style and morphs his body into that of a humanoid kaiju. So now he has superhuman strength and abilities, but also being a kaiju, he's now being hunted by the very group of people that he desperately wants to be a part of. And the JDF have given him a designation as they begin their hunt for him. Kaiju number 8. Name drop! But for some reason, Kafka still attempts to join the JDF. He just has to mask his true abilities so that no one sends him off to be, like, dissected or something. And it's going well. He's covering his tracks so much so that every measurement the JDF has to screen candidates says that he's probably the weakest recruit they have. He's just lucky that no one that was running all the tests saw him lift a car just outside in the parking lot without any assistance. So that's the gist of the narrative. Joining the kaiju hunting forces, searching for powerful kaiju that might be a threat to humanity, while also keeping his new kaiju identity a secret. And there's a lot of questions that the narrative isn't covering. And who knows if it actually will. The main similarities between Kaiju Number 8 and Windbreaker, since we're still doing that, is that they are both adaptations of a manga that have reasonable chapter and volume counts at this point. Kaiju Number 8 has 12 volumes published and continues to be in print. I put that into quotations because it's being printed digitally, which isn't really printing, but I'm just being pedantic. Like Windbreaker, though, by the time the season is over, there's absolutely no way that this adaptation is going to be able to cover the whole story. It is literally impossible. But while Windbreaker makes its whole adaptation feel like a prologue to the real story about its protagonist, Kaiju Number 8 truly feels like it could pull through and cover a large chunk of our protagonist's story and what it's all about. Kafka himself is just a wonderful main character, you know? You can't hate the man. He's not driven by like any kind of edgelord fantasy like many isekai protagonists are. He is a lovable ball of goof who also happens to be able to one-punch most things that he goes up against. And his desire to live up to a childhood promise is admirable. He has these abilities now, and he wants to figure out some way to use them without getting killed by the very people he's helping. It's very compelling television. Also, the main reason I would actually recommend this adaptation is because, well, after watching it, I don't feel compelled to read the manga. This is all personal preference and taste, of course, but I feel like as long as the series doesn't leave us off at a cliffhanger or anything, I will probably finish watching it and just wait. Wait until another season gets greenlit for production or not, as the case may be, and, you know, I'm fine with that. I feel like there is enough about the story present in what will be these first and maybe only 12 episodes that is just like enough entertainment in and of itself. Like if you want to keep going and read the manga beyond this point, sure, go for it. But I think I would be okay, which I assume just makes everything confusing because I didn't and don't recommend you to watch Windbreaker because you might as well just go on and read the manga. But I do recommend Kaiju Number 8 because I don't feel like I need to read the manga. Like, do I like Kaiju Number 8 more than Windbreaker? In some ways. I think I relate to Kafka more as a person and a character for a lot of reasons. He's like a shining example of someone who just really needed a lucky break to complete the goals that he had for himself in life. And when he gets said break, well, it wasn't exactly what he expected. But he does take most of that in stride. He doesn't get all like self-reflectory, nor does he start to have like an identity crisis or anything. Heck, he doesn't even really question where or why he got these powers. We haven't gotten into what that bug that phase-hugged him was, or what its goals were in picking him. We don't know the end goal of any of that. And you know, I prefer it that way. It's another reason why I did compare this series to Attack on Titan, because Titan had, for many years, a lot of mysteries on where the Titans came from and where those powers and abilities originated from, and it became this whole mess of things that like always existed, but then when you found out about them, it like changed your perspective on the entire setting, and I don't really feel like I liked that part of this setting. Spoilers for my thoughts on any kind of lengthy discussion I end up doing on Titan in the future. But yeah, the world that is in this adaptation, this small slice of the story that is presented, is what I am really enjoying. Once we get into the weeds of where all these kaiju come from and what their goals are, why some are humanoid with intelligence and others are just like mindless monsters, once we try to explain all of that, I feel like some of the style or atmosphere of the setting is going to get lost there a little bit. I don't feel like I want to know those things. This series, in part, is about a bunch of monsters and our heroes beating the crap out of them, blowing them up, cutting them down, and everything in between. And really, that's all I want out of it. Just humans fighting bugs. I do not want to know more. I want to follow Kafka as he attempts to work with the JDF, despite him now being a kaiju himself. I want to see him build relationships with the very people that want to kill him. And eventually, I want to see what happens when the curtain is lifted on Kafka's identity. These are the things I am invested in. And if we get to see those parts adapted, then great. 5 stars, will absolutely recommend. I don't need anything else. Of course, we could not get that by the end of 12 episodes, and I could just be walking down the road of adaptation hell again. But I'm gonna take the risk this time around. I guess we'll just follow the rule of cool. You know, the bullshit excuse when someone wants to say something is still good even though they can't actually justify it. Really, that is probably why this series is taking off as well as it is. Like, it's not going to get people going to watch old Godzilla films or anything, but like half the reason why I think there's 30 plus Godzilla films in the first place over the years is because people just love the idea of giant monsters getting the beat down, except for that second Pacific Rim film that everybody forgets actually exists. The first one's still amazing though. So if you take all that love of kaiju fighting and you package it up with some, well-received shonen tropes, though not enough to actually get the manga into Weekly Shonen Jump for some reason, just its associated mobile app, which was shocking and depressing to learn when I was doing research about this series, because it deserves better. Kaiju number 8 does a lot to add refreshing changes to the shonen formula, though, which probably makes me love it all the more. Starting Kafka off as a disposal man for kaiju body parts is amazing to me. It's rare that you get a setting that even bothers to explain things like this. Sure, there are giant monsters and our heroes will defeat them, but what happens then? Normally we don't find out, or it's just like in Super Sentai, where the giant monsters just disintegrate after a giant explosion, and there's never any collateral damage at all. Those are the things that I wish stories would expand more on, even though it is doubtful that even Kaiju number 8 will continue beyond this point, because now since Kafka has moved into actually joining the JDF, we can get things that are a little more standard from the genre from here on out. Like moving up the ranks, protecting friends, getting stronger, getting his senpai to notice him only to get noticed by the wrong senpai for the wrong reasons. There's just a lot to love and enjoy about Kaiju number 8 that makes it very easy to recommend, which is why I'm doing it, because I loved it, and I don't see a reason why not to watch it. That's what stopped me from recommending Windbreaker. Do I like Windbreaker? Yes, and in many ways, I prefer it to Kaiju number 8. In fact, in most ways, I would rather watch Windbreaker than Kaiju number 8, but since eventually there is not going to be any more Windbreaker, and that makes me sad, I think by contrast, I will be okay when Kaiju number 8 inevitably ends and we don't get another season of it. So that's where my recommendation lies. Go watch Kaiju number 8 and read Windbreaker, Best of All Worlds, or at least most worlds. You'll need a few other of my seasonal recommendations in order to make a complete world. Hello, would you like to talk about our Lord and Savior, Holo the Wise Wolf of Yotsu? But that's it for our show today. A thank you to my patrons who make it possible for me to do these sorts of videos and give me the ability to feed myself. And an immense thank you especially to our patrons like Sailor Arashi, Omar Showman, Ross Emerson, Hector Montemayor, Aiden, Siri Yamako, and Ryphen Bonaparte. We can't continue this without your support, and however much you are able to help, I am eternally grateful. So until next time, ladies, gentlemen, and others, watch more anime and stay frosty.